Hi everyone, welcome to Collectively Vigilant. I'm Dr. D. Here at Collectively Vigilant, we learn the law through true crime. This is a slightly different podcast. I usually never start like this, but I recently had the fortune of being interviewed by Kyrren from Tumble Upward Podcast, where she and I spoke about two different cases from Australia, or somewhat identical circumstances. However, the way the law treated these two women was so very different. One woman happens to be an Aboriginal, and the other one is a non Aboriginal. So, we thought that this would be such an interesting conversation to have on our podcast where we deal with true crime scenarios, but of course, we like to learn through true crime. So, this would be an interesting one. So, enjoy the conversation.
Today's episode is about survival, justice, and how the law interprets self-defense in situations of domestic violence. I'm joined by lawyer and law professor Dr. D, who analyses major criminal cases through a legal lens. Together, we're unpacking two powerful Australian cases, Lena Kasparian and Jodie Gore. Both involve women who killed abusive partners, yet the outcomes were completely different. This episode isn't about sensationalizing crime, it's about understanding the law, systemic bias, and what happens when someone fights to survive. Dr. D, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. How are you this morning?
Yeah, not too bad. It's great chatting to you. So I just wanted to start with, currently you're a professor and you work in legal aid cases. What kind of cases do you typically deal with?
So, all sorts of cases because I work with law firms in New Delhi and I do a lot of legal work in basically legal aid in New Delhi, usually domestic violence. So, the cases that we're going to discuss today is basically right up my alley.
And from your experience, do people often misunderstand how self-defense works legally?
Yeah, and it also differs from country to country because most countries actually, you will see that most women who've been incarcerated around the world are basically themselves victims of domestic violence. The police refuses to step in. Culturally, usually women are discouraged from pursuing any kind of legal action towards their partners just so that they can keep the family together. So it's actually a really sad statistic. Most, I remember this statistic from 2019. It said, which was done in American prisons, and they said 87% of all incarcerated females have been abused by their domestic partner at some point, if not some other family member. So that's a major population. And actually, as we go into the cases today, you'll see that there is extreme disparity. Sometimes some women are protected under the guise of domestic violence and standing your ground. That's what it's called in America. When somebody attacks you inside your own house, if you end up killing that person, usually that's called stand your ground in the law. However, if the person that you're hurting is your partner or is some sort of boyfriend or you've been on a date with this person, then stand your ground doesn't apply for women. The whole basically legal arena is open for interpretation, and especially in Australia, especially in countries like the UK, US, anywhere where we have common law, things differ from one judge to the other. Somebody would interpret the statute in their own way and the law in their own way. So in some ways, common law is remarkable because judges can take decisions on a dime. They don't need long legislative procedures or statutes to work on something. But in other ways, you'll also see that it's very subjective. You will have some judges who are extremely, conscious of the fact that some women have really suffered. And then you'll see that other judges will probably have some preconceived notion. And, there's a lot of disparity is what I want to say.
Very interesting. I know here in Australia, even if you have an intruder, so a stranger, come onto your property
Yeah.
and you don't know them, you can't, like, if you do something to protect yourself or your property or your family and hurt them, you could still
Yeah.
be charged with like manslaughter or murder.
Absolutely, because in the law, they use the word violence was imminent towards you. So just because someone walked into your house, unless and until they were holding like a knife to your throat, or
Mhm.
they were, and you have visible marks over your body, usually people inside homes get charged.
Yeah.
And that's the unfortunate reality, because in many parts of the world, and especially the country which I come from, where you basically cannot rely on the police to come and help you. So usually people take the law in their own hands. And the minute you do that, you will be judged by the law, but not for the fact that the police did not show up. So you see this kind of strange catch 22 situation.
Yeah.
And the two cases that we're going to go into today basically highlight that, because if you, let's say, if you're an Aboriginal woman who lives somewhere really far off where the police services will not get to you in time, what do you do in that situation? Do you
Yeah.
let yourself be killed, or
Yeah.
there's this human instinct that comes over where if something's close to you, you're going to use it to basically just save yourself?
So one of the cases you chose is Lena, a Sydney mother involved in a fatal domestic incident involving her partner. Can we dive into that?
Right. So the first case is Lena Kasparian. She comes from a really wealthy family, and her case took place in 2011 when she was about 35 years old. So I'll give you a little bit of her background so that your viewers will also have a bit of an understanding of where Lena came from and what happened on that fateful day. Right.
Yeah.
So Elena Kasparian's early life was intensely work driven even as a child. And she was raised in an environment where she came from a family which was in the jewelry and the diamond business. And her parents were into fashion imports and exports. And though Lena is actually a twin sister, only she was put to work, and her other twin wasn't, was something that I found really interesting, that though they might be like a minute or two apart, one sibling gets the bulk of the work. And maybe that's because they saw a lot of promise in her and the other one wasn't maybe inclined to do that. But I thought it was really interesting. So she came from this family, as I said. They were into retail, they were clothing retail, jewelry, diamonds. Basically, a lot of business responsibility was given to her as a child. And actually, by the time she was 17 years old, she was managing a jewelry store in Parramatta. Now, you're from Australia, so you would know where that is. I actually don't even know where that is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you been there?
I think it's in Sydney, but my geography skills are not great.
Okay. Well, I do have a Sydney mug, but other than that, I've never been there.
Amazing.
So I just took out my Sydney mug. I was like, in solidarity, let me take that out. So as I said, Lena has a twin sister, but she, frankly, it doesn't seem like the family gave her any work. And because of the intense work ethic that she had, she actually became a self-taught fashion designer by the time she was 20 years old. And she actually launched her own label as well. And she basically was a public figure a small time public figure in Sydney. And that's when she met her boyfriend, a gentleman by the name of Mark Zatarian. And they both started going out. By this time, she was about 35 years old. And I'll take you to that fateful day, which was in the May of 2011. By this time, they'd been dating for a while, almost a whole year. And Lena already had two children from her partner, who she, I think, was separated from. She'd already been divorced. So she was a single mom. So her relationship with this boyfriend was verbally abusive sometimes, but really never, he had never really laid hands on her. And unfortunately, it seems like on that particular day, her boyfriend, Mark Zatarian, was getting really, he was heavily drunk and he was putting his hands on her a lot and he was pushing her around. And on this particular day, as I said, she was trying to shield her children. Her children were actually holding on to her legs, especially her son was holding on to her legs. And the daughter sort of goes up to Mark Zatarian and says, "Stop hurting my mom." So as
Oh,
you can
wow.
see, I mean, this was a very sort of chaotic situation. She's trying to shield her children from this guy who's basically a heavy, tall, drunk guy. She's trying
Mm.
to protect them.
Do you
And
know how
that's
old
when
her
in
children were?
so to my understanding, they were both under the age of 10. So these are
Yeah.
young kids. And this gentleman has already been in their life for a year. And it must be such a confronting thing for them as well to see their mom being physically abused by this man, right? And they're protective, so they're trying to, save their mom, little kids. And that's when Lena picked up a kitchen knife and the partner walked into the kitchen knife. So it's not like she stabbed him, he walked into the kitchen knife, and the kitchen knife then stabbed him right in the heart, 14 millimeters. And unfortunately, somehow, it pierced him right at his heart. At that time he was not bleeding that much. As he as he walked away from them, what she does is she takes her children and then she walks inside her laundry room, and she actually locks herself inside, and then she calls the police. As she's calling the police, she basically hears him gasping for breath, and that's when she walks out. Her kids are locked in. She walks out to see that he's basically bleeding profusely. And by the time the police arrives, he basically was cold to the touch. It was basically a fatal piercing of the knife. And although the emergency services did take him to the hospital, but he was basically declared dead.
Mm.
And she was taken to the police station. She was charged. She gave a full confessions. What she was basically telling them what had happened. However, she was charged with grievous bodily harm. And later on, when the police found out that he had basically been pronounced dead, by that time, she was then charged with murder because he was bleeding. So it's no longer a battery, it's no longer a grievous bodily harm, it goes up to murder. And then she was charged with murder. Then basically she had to defend herself in the New South Wales Supreme Court. That's where her case was. And she basically, thankfully, comes from a family with a lot of money. So she was able to get herself a very good defense team. And she went in front of the jury. She gave her testimony, and this was corroborated by her neighbors who heard all the noise in the house, by her daughter who was around the age of 10. So she was able to speak on behalf of her mom and tell the jury and basically give a statement of what had happened. So, the the defense basically tried to say that it was not a deliberate attack, it was a defensive posture. And 14 millimeters is basically not much. Usually most people would not lose their life if it was a 14 millimeter injury. Most of us would just have to get a stitch or two. It was
Wow.
just so unfortunate that he was pierced right where his heart is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
somehow the rib cage did not stop it. So usually if you get hit, usually your rib cage would take it.
Mm.
Somehow in this particular case, this gentleman was just it was extremely unfortunate.
Yeah.
And the trial concluded very rapidly. It was one of the shortest murder trials in New South Wales history, and the jury ultimately accepted that Lena Kasparian had acted in self-defense, and they returned a verdict of not guilty. So
Mhm.
this decision, of course, freed her from her criminal liability, and this thankfully became a new beginning and a long process for her professional and career. And it also became a catalyst in her life where she was able to reset her goals after this. By the way, they've made a movie about her. She's written a book about this. The movie is called 14mm, and
Yeah.
I think the book is also called the same. It's such an interesting case of victimhood and who we think is a victim. Because if you look at this woman outwardly, she basically looks like a model. She
Yeah.
looks like, the kind of person who would probably never go through anything like this. Because all of us have a stereotypical image of what a victim looks like. She
Mm.
does not look like that. Even when she speaks with so much, like force, and you wouldn't think of this person as someone who would be victimized by anyone.
So had she had gone with force to defend herself and it was a deeper wound, do you think it would have been more likely that she would have been put in jail and not released? Or it would still be...
It's difficult to say, but
Yeah.
I will tell you this, that I'm pretty sure you know this already, which is in any common law country, frankly, in any country around the world, if you have very good attorneys and you throw enough money, you are able to save yourself. And I think that's one of the saddest things about the legal system. I don't think we should call it the justice system at all. I never do on my channel. I always keep saying it's the legal system, it's the legal system. Because the relationship with the law and why somebody is able to plead innocence while the other person has to plead guilty is just so arbitrary that this can only be interpreted as legality rather than justice. So I think she was able to plead it because, frankly, it was just such a small cut. But of course, if we look at it from the point of view of the victim's family, even calling him a victim is such a dicey thing, because clearly on that particular night he was the aggressor and she was the victim. But in the eyes of the law, because of her, he was killed. So he's the victim.
Yeah.
Right. So, at this, you can be the victim and the perpetrator all in one go. And that's one of the travesties and the ironies of being a pleading self-defense in a case of domestic violence. And you see this all around the world. You will literally see women who've been beaten up black and blue, and they are in police custody, and they are the perpetrators that day. But what unfortunately most people don't see, and the law fails to take into account mostly, is the fact that there is usually a long history of being a victim, except that particular night when the woman, usually it's women, I'm not saying it's always women, usually it's these women who on that one day take this decision of saving themselves in their own hands. And on that particular day, the boyfriend ends up dying or the husband ends up dying. So it is just such a murky territory.
Yeah, it's very much not black and white. Like, there's just so much variance. So if we talk about Jodie Gore's case, can you explain a bit about that?
Right. So when I was looking into this, I just thought, let me just look for another case where both the cases were of Australian women. I thought, let me just specifically look for cases where, the crime was committed with the same weapon. And here it was a kitchen knife in both the cases. However, the treatment of both the women and how the legal system handled both the women is just so different. Now we're going to talk about the case of Jodie Gore, who was an Aboriginal woman who lived in East Kimberley region of Western Australia, living in a place which is called Kunumura. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And her life before this particular incident that we're going to talk about, this particular incident took place on June 13 of 2015. However, going back 2 decades, there's a long history of this woman getting beaten up by her partner, whose name was Damien Jones. And it was a very complex relationship. This is an Aboriginal family. There are lots of problems there to begin with. There's a lot of physical abuse of these women, repeated abuse at the hands of male partners in the family. It seems that as I was looking into it, it's not something which is taken seriously by the law and by the police. It's just something that it seems to me, and I could be completely wrong, please correct me if I'm wrong in the comments below, that usually when violence happens in Aboriginal families, the police sort of thinks, oh, these people are just like that. It's the reality of their life. So usually the police does not step in, which is really sad, because if people are paying exactly the same taxes and the same laws apply to them when you take them to the court, then why not give them equal protection under the law? Yeah. So there is disparity there. But I think I started editorializing the whole thing. Let me just tell you the story. So as I said, Jodie Gore was an Aboriginal woman who was from East Kimberley. And she had approximately spent 20 years with her partner, Damien Jones. And he was physically degrading to her, verbally abusive to her. He would kick her, punch her very regularly. Uh, Around her neighborhood, she was known as the woman whose hair had been pulled out several times. He would hit her with any object that was basically at arm's length. Repeatedly, half of the things in this household were broken because he was beating her up. Now, I would also try to humanize Damien Jones a little bit, because so far everything I've told you so far seems like this is just an abusive partner. And yes, he is. That was the reality of his life. But also, this man was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. So
wow.
that's another added layer where this has gone untreated because he's an Aboriginal man.
Yeah.
And the kind of care that maybe people from other parts of Australia would get, he was not getting. So she was basically dealing with a household full of people she was the one meeting everybody's needs and being his punching bag all at the same time. And around this time, she had serious kidney disease as well. She was diagnosed with that disease in 2008. So as you can see, this is an isolated woman. She has a lot to do in the house. She has children. She has grandchildren by this time. And she's at a structural disadvantage. She's at a cultural disadvantage inside Australia. And now I'll take you to the day of June 13 of 2015, when Jodie and her partner were actually attending a birthday party. And at this birthday party, everyone was drinking, so was Jodie. And her partner basically began harassing her and saying that whatever little money she had to give it to him because he wanted to gamble that away. And on this particular day, the situation escalated a lot, and he was constantly punching her. And what she did was, as he was punching her, she was trying to get away. At one point, she pushes her partner, and he fell on the ground, and he had a huge rock in his hand, and he was about to attack her with that. And she could see that basically he would smash her head in on that day.
Yeah.
And that's when, between the ongoing struggle, she picks up a knife from the kitchen. And that's when she stabbed him in the heart. And this one single act of stabbing, basically, he died because of it. And this was, initially it appeared that this was a spontaneous altercation, and that's exactly how it should be seen. However, because of the fatality of her partner Damien Jones, she was actually charged with murder. And although for her self-defense, her defense attorney was a state-appointed attorney, she couldn't hire an expensive attorney. So she basically said, look at these 20 years. There are so many people who will come and tell you that I was beaten up all the time. And on this particular day, everybody who was at the birthday party had seen the escalation go from a calm birthday party, everyone happy, and then this woman being beaten up.
Yeah.
And by the time they go home, she's basically fighting for her life.
Yeah.
However, none of this was taken as self-defense. The jury rejected her claim, and she was actually convicted. And Justice Lindy Jenkins sentenced her to life imprisonment with a non-parole period of 20 years.
Jeez.
And they said, oh, this was a drunk woman who was regularly drunk, and she was violent on that day. So in her particular case, the fact that she was a drunken Aboriginal woman was basically played up. And her history as a victim of domestic violence was not taken into account. And the fact that her partner was a known schizophrenic was not taken into account. And this is a huge miscarriage of justice. And we see this time and again when it comes to the systematic failure of Aboriginal women under the Australian legal system.
Yeah.
So and she was, of course, taken into prison. And thankfully, before I go to the thankful part, let me just tell you that, as I had told you, in 2008, she was already diagnosed with this renal disease, because of which her kidneys were failing, and she was actually on dialysis even when she was taken to the prison. And imagine, I mean, when you're inside the prison, you have absolutely no dignity. You're strip searched all the time, and you're spread eagle because they want to check all the cavities of your body all the time so that
Yeah.
nobody's hiding anything. So there is no semblance of any privacy whatsoever.
Mm.
And especially when you have a physically debilitating disease like this one. Anyway, but there is this one newspaper in Western Australia that actually took her cause and they ran with it, and time again, there's an investigative journalist who's actually been awarded for this particular story because of her work. Jodie Gore was her case was presented to the Attorney General, whose name is John Quingley, who intervened in the year 2019, and then he used his royal prerogative to give her mercy. And after spending 4 years in prison, so from 2015 to 2019, she was in the prison, and that's when she was given mercy and she was basically set free. So in that sense, we have probably some semblance of justice, if you want to look at it as a semblance of justice.
Yeah.
But probably this woman should not have been charged in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. And she spent still like 4 to 5 years in prison.
Yes, yeah.
And I'm sure there's many other cases out there that don't get that second chance of someone
Right.
story.
So, when I was looking into this case, because it's been covered because of that one particular newspaper, I was actually trying to see what this woman looks like. There's only like 3 pictures of her. However, when it comes to Lena Kasparian's case, there's a 60 minutes documentary. You can see her, like her design label. Both of them are victims. I'm just saying that look at the disparity in the media as well. The media, of course, I just appreciated a young journalist who took this up as the moral injustice that it is, and she worked on it, for 4 years. And thanks to her, Jodie Gore is out today. However, usually you will see that no glamorous journalist, no 60 Minutes goes to cover cases of people like Jodie Gore. And that media disparity is unfortunate, but it happens all the time in every single country in the world. So I was about to tell you that this is actually such an interesting thing that because it happens in all countries in the world, in America, there's a special term for it. In America, this is called the missing white woman syndrome. And you will see that if a person of color goes missing, usually that is not even covered that much on the media. However, if a white child goes missing or if a white woman goes missing, it becomes not only national but international news. I can actually give you the case of a woman, a 20-year-old woman. Her name was Gabby Petito. She was a van lifer. She had uploaded just one YouTube, like van life kind of vlog.
Yeah, I think I've heard of this one.
Yes. So when she went missing, it became not only national news, like literally international news.
Yeah.
And her partner had basically killed her in a national forest and left her there. And he basically took his own life later. But long story short, the reason why I bring about the Gabby Petito case is because her parents basically, when they saw the disparity in the way their child was treated, she became like literally there were live streams on where she was. People took it upon themselves. Even though this was the middle of the pandemic, people went looking for her on foot.
Yeah.
And during the same time, I think the statistic was that 300 other people had gone missing. And the media did not cover those 300 people.
Yeah.
I mean, it's brilliant that they I'm not saying that they shouldn't have covered Gabby Petito.
Sure.
It's amazing that you should do that. But how about we give everyone probably at least some limelight, because every life is the same in the eyes of the law and hopefully in the eyes of the Lord as well.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate.
And how do you think people who can't afford good attorneys and lawyers come out generally compared to people who can afford?
How important is it to get a good attorney? I mean, it's imperative. And but unfortunately, good lawyers are usually very seasoned people. They're also very expensive. and not everyone can afford it. That's why in most countries around the world you have legal aid. But unfortunate reality of legal aid is those lawyers are so overworked that in most jurisdictions, I can actually tell you about my own country. I remember reading a statistic about 4 or 5 years ago in India that a public defender, that's what they're called everywhere in the world, when you cannot hire your own attorney, you are given a public defender. They usually get 1.5 minutes per case. That's it.
What?
Your whole
One and a
life
half
is at
minutes.
stake. Yeah, I mean, India's population is 1.3 billion people. So, and India unfortunately has one more unfortunate reality, which is most of the people in Indian jails are under trial, and they can be under trial for up to 20 years, and they don't even go to the court. So 20 years when they're actually innocent, they're in the
Wow.
jail at
Just
that time
waiting.
because absolutely they're just waiting. However, when we know for sure that it's our politicians who have actually done something, they're actually out roaming around. And then these people who have basically might be innocent, might not be innocent. I'm not saying that they're always innocent.
Yeah.
However, they're actually not even given bail, and
Yeah.
they're under trial, and they're in the jails basically.
That's actually crazy. I did not know that.
Right. So these are the kind of things I usually cover on my channel. I think your people, your audience will be able to tell that I'm a little too passionate about these things.
No, it's great. I think it shows as well, like from previous cases, that even the power of someone in like reopening it or investigating it or showing media or limelight on it can actually change the outcome of what has already been written in the past, which is crazy.
Right. And I remember when you and I started talking, you once mentioned to me that you would want something about the element of coercive control as well. Right. So actually, if you look at it, especially in the case of Jodie Gore, there is 20 years of coercive control in that relationship. And
Yeah.
somebody would stay in that relationship because I think that's the first reaction people have. Why didn't you leave? You could have
Yeah.
left, right? However, think about the situation of this woman who's an Aboriginal woman who was never able to get any education. Okay, for her, she lives on what's almost like living on a compound. Very little to no job opportunities in that area, and you're married to someone who is clearly schizophrenic. However, because you don't have enough money, you can't get mental health services for him, so you have to be this person's punching bag. And of course, I have some sympathy for that person as well, because
Yeah.
if a person is a schizophrenic, they have no control over their own confrontational nature.
Yeah.
So it's just, the layer of victimization in some communities is extreme.
Yeah. And it could have even been different if he was like medicated for schizophrenia. I know here as well, I don't know if you've heard of it, we have a system called the NDIS, which supports disability people. They get funding from the government to pay for like therapy and services. And schizophrenia is actually recognized disability on that scheme. So it's just very unfortunate.
Do you know when that was enacted into the law? Because her case is from 2015.
Ooh, I'm trying to think when the NDIS was around. I think it's only been around in the last 8 or so years.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
her case at this point is almost 10.5 years old. So maybe at that time that was not something that was available to her. And we also have to, there's another unfortunate reality. I remember in India when I help out with these kind of legal aid cases, usually when people are trying to get a divorce, especially when women are in these kind of like really bad situations where they're literally being beaten up, many times they're forced into arbitration. And in arbitration, I remember going with a couple of people there a few times, a close family member. And when I used to go for arbitration with this family member, most of the women sitting there would just literally be sitting with a piece of paper, and they would say, you would walk in. This has happened to me a few times where you'd walk in and they would literally walk up to you and say, oh, you look like you have an education. Can you read this paper and tell me why I have been called here?
Ugh. Yeah.
It is literally heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, when you bring these kind of things to light, if you're an educated person anywhere, even if you think you can't do anything, actually you can.
Yeah.
Every time you think that you need special training to become a lawyer, or you need to be in legal aid, absolutely not. If you go to any arbitration center, I think they're all around the world. If you just literally go in as a volunteer, you can at least help people out with reading jargon. If you're educated yourself, you would probably understand jargon a little more than maybe a person who isn't, and just help them out, because your physical presence, just reading out a paper for them, would be such a huge difference in their life. But for us, it's just reading a piece of paper. So
Yeah.
I always encourage my students, although, I live in a first world country, it's a civil law jurisdiction. So my common law degree is basically almost useless here because I don't practice law in this jurisdiction. That's why, whenever I get a chance, anybody gets in touch with me with help of any type, I always encourage my students. I actually tell them to start researching with me, and we form like a little legal aid committee there, and then we
Yeah.
just start researching this and working on these kind of things, because no matter where you are in the world, you can help. Because I mean, look at Karen. She's sitting in Australia. I'm not in Australia right now. We're literally in touch thanks to the internet. So
Mm.
all of us can help. You just need that spirit to help someone out.
So I guess I just want to ask you a few like legal questions as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How much influence does the jury perception play in self-defense cases?
So the interesting thing is that not in every single common law country in the world do you have the jury system.
Okay.
However, as a matter of fact, in most cases, you have two options. You can go for a bench trial, or you can go for a jury trial. If you are the victim of domestic violence and coercive control, frankly, it is better to go for a jury trial, because when a living, breathing human being sits in front of the jury, makes eye contact, cries, and tells the jury what happened to them over a period of time, usually most juries are nice enough and sympathetic enough to see through it. However, in the case of Jodi Gore, I don't know why, it was a jury case that her self defense was not taken seriously.
Yeah.
And it's probably the failure on the part of the legal questions as well, because many a times we can't even blame the jury. Many times you and me as outsiders know a lot more information about a case than the jury does, because the jury gets very limited pieces of evidence, and they're supposed to convict you only on those pieces of evidence. So many a times after jury members walk out after a verdict, and the media asks them, why did you do that? Didn't you know this and this? And they say, well, they never told us all this.
Yeah.
So actually, we can't blame the juries as well, because it's in the hands of the judge and the prosecutor what goes as pieces of evidence in front of the jury. Now, whatever I'm saying is a blanket statement. This applies in most parts of the world, but might not apply in every single part of the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
But more or less, I would say, if you are a victim of domestic violence, and usually people would be more sympathetic to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But interestingly, a few months ago, you remember the case of this really famous rapper, P. Diddy, the case of
Oh,
P.
P.
Diddy.
Diddy. Yeah.
Yeah, I was about to tell you that in the case of P. Diddy, actually lots of jury members, there is a documentary about it, and a lot of jury members are actually in that documentary, and they asked basically the jury members, why is it that you did not listen to this one particular female who was with P. Diddy for about almost 20 years? And why did you not see through the fact that she was coercively controlled? And many jury members said that, if if you didn't like it, she could have left. She was a rich woman. She was a singer herself. She could have left. And every time he would be bad to her and he would beat her up, then he would give her like a private plane. He would give her diamond jewelry. And many jury members were basically convinced of the fact that, this means that she was not really a victim, that she was in it for the money. And she was also getting so much from P. Diddy, basically, that he should just be seen as a partner who was violent, but she was in it too, and she was in it for the money. So, jury members are lay people, and all of us have different life. So if you have someone on the jury who's been poor their whole life, they'll say, yes, I understand that she was beaten up, but the next day she would get a Harry Winston or a Tiffany necklace, right? And that makes up for it. So, so I'm sorry, I cannot give you one complete answer on the jury. That's why I keep giving you all these layers, because the legal system is just such a complicated thing.
Yeah. But it also goes to show again the inequality that money creates. Like, he probably could have got away with it better because he had so much money, and it is still giving her all these things. Yeah. In this particular case, he did. There has been an out-of-court settlement with many, many women in the P. Diddy case. However, and because there is an out-of-court settlement, that means there is also a clause in that settlement that those women cannot talk about. It's a non-disclosure agreement. So even though you're a victim and you get, yes, you've been compensated, let's say 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, but that's still coercive control. The person is still controlling you by giving you money and not letting you tell anyone what really happened. Yeah. So what changes do you reckon are needed in the legal system to better handle domestic violence cases?
It will probably take us one lifetime, and we'll still be here if we keep talking about that. So interestingly enough, the clause of coercive control is actually not in the legal system everywhere. It's not even in Australia everywhere. It's only in one part of Australia that they have taken up the cause of coercive control, and they have used that in the law. It's actually, so in the UK, it's very widely used in the UK, in some parts of the US, in one or two parts of Australia. I'm sorry, I don't exactly remember which one right now. So it's actually something which happens everywhere in the world. If there is something that the law could easily do everywhere in the world, it's just to take the UK statute, because the UK has gone ahead and they've worked so hard on this law for 11 years. Probably all of us can just use parts of it in our own countries and enact it into the law. So that would go a long way when it comes to domestic violence. Because not all domestic violence looks like people beating each other up. A lot of domestic violence is just telling someone what to wear, but to the extent where that person loses their basic human identity and dignity.
And they've had good success with using it in their system.
Right. So actually that again, by the way, you would have made a great legal law student, because all the questions that you're asking me are just, they're such layered questions. Because I would say success, A, comes because yes, you've enacted a law. B, it comes when your police personnel can actually use it, and they can understand that there is, if you keep getting called to a particular address all the time, and there's lots of violence there, but it's not always the kind of violence which can be physically seen. I think if you have it in the law and your police personnel get training, and then your public prosecutors use it all the time in every single case of domestic violence, then yes, it's a success. Otherwise, it's not. And that's why, channels like yours, channels like mine are really important, because when we speak about coercive control, an average person, the more people hear it, the more people use it in jargon, that's actually better.
I guess sometimes also it'd be hard to prove coercive control, because a lot of the time you can't see it, or you don't have marks on you, or Right, because in some countries, culturally,
For example, in India, it is extremely, like, this is the norm. I shouldn't even say it's extremely common. It's the norm that once you get married, you go in and live with your in-laws and in your husband's house, right? And basically, they tell you when you should eat, your paycheck goes into their bank accounts. So, in a
Wow.
way, you have modern urban women working, but most women don't have control over their own money.
Wow,
So,
that's
in
so
some
bad.
places, this is just a cultural thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
those people might be the loveliest people in the world, but frankly, they're keeping your paychecks. You have to ask them for pocket money for the money that you have made. You have to ask their permission to buy food that you want to buy. So, in some countries, it would be considered cultural and respecting your elders and giving them your paycheck. And in other countries, this will be seen as coercive control, because if somebody tells you what to wear, what you can watch on TV, who you should vote for, what kind of clothing you should be wearing, when you can go out, where your paycheck goes, how your children should get an education. Frankly, you're not living your own life, right?
Yeah.
According to our Western understanding of democracy and individual identity. However, in most parts of the world, this is just the norm. This is just how women live.
Yeah. It's just the culture.
Mm.
Well, I've had such a good chat with you. I've learned so much.
I'm so glad that we were able to talk about this, because, as you can see, I can just blabber on about these things. I'm just so passionate.
Yeah. I guess I don't have my usual reoccurring questions to ask you because this episode is a bit different to the usual episodes. But
Mm.
if you could give anyone any other advice on any of the topics we've discussed, or how to get legal assistance, or what's the best, like legal aid and everything like that, do you have any advice that you can tell our listeners?
Right. So most countries around the world actually, if you just log into your country's legal, let's say the Supreme Court or the High Court, you literally just write that on Google. Let's say the High Court of Australia, their website will open up, and then you can see that in your area, there's something like, if you click there, it will say legal aid. So you can actually ask for legal help and legal aid. It can also be done over the phone. You have lots of women's shelters. They're called women's shelters, but of course I keep saying the word women, but of course men can be victimized as well. I actually
Mm,
have a few videos on my channel right now where men have been victimized. I have a few videos coming out where unfortunately men don't ever get up and say a girl beat me up or
yeah.
she's controlling my money, because then we look at them as, oh well, you're the man, so nobody can control you. But frankly, I mean, we all know, you and I know so many friends of ours who are so controlling with their boyfriends and husbands, it's almost like they don't let them breathe, right? And we know that that's coercive control, but men usually don't go and say that. So
Mm,
men actually suffer even more in silence.
yeah.
So as I was saying, yeah, so there is help out there. All you have to do is, in this internet enabled world, you just have to Google things. You can actually, even simpler, you can just ask ChatGPT, even the free version, to give you all the links in one go. Just click on them. Most of the phone numbers which are associated to these kind of organizations are toll free, so they don't even cost you anything.
Yeah.
So I would say there's help out there. And if you hear these kind of things over any channel, even mine, even Karen's, go and tell your friends. Or if you see any kind of red flags, always tell people that, that boyfriend of yours or that girlfriend of yours, maybe it's time to look at other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's really good advice. And yeah, I'll put some of the links in the show notes as well. So tell us the details of your podcast.
Right. So my podcast is now in the second season. I actually cover legal cases from around the world. So if you're interested in understanding law from around the world, but through the lens of true crime, so I usually tell a story first, just like I did today, Lena's story and Jodi's story, and then I explain the law. So if you're interested in anything like this, you can find us on Collectively Vigilant Podcast.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Lovely talking to you.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to say, if you or anyone you know has a story to share, please reach out so that I can keep bringing you stories from our community. Let's get as many voices heard as possible. And if you enjoyed this episode, please remember to like, subscribe, review, and follow. Thanks, everyone.